Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bolt Report. The playoffs are here, and the Tampa Bay Lightning will be taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs once again in round one. As always, my name is Jake Ricker, and alongside me is my good friend and co-host Michael Wax. Michael, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm really excited for the playoffs to start. Getting to that game 70, game 75, game 80 type of feeling. Those games didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but now, we've been waiting for this moment. I'm very excited.
I am excited as well. So let's start things off by taking a look at the round one schedule, which was released last night. And it's a pretty simple schedule, as you would expect. There are no back to back games this year. So thank you, NHL, for that this year. The only weird thing or difference in this schedule is that there is a 2 day gap between games 4 and 5. And Michael, we were talking about this before. It's probably because they just wanted the Lightning and Leafs on a Saturday. But other than that, pretty normal schedule. Game 1 and Game 4 are at 7:30 p.m. with the rest of the games at 7 p.m. And of course, games 5, 6, and 7 are still to be determined, as we don't know if those games will be needed.
Yeah, if we go by any indication from last year, game five until, of course, game seven was like the most crucial game in the series. So, of course, they want that on a Saturday when most people can watch it. They're going to put it on, ESPN in the States or TNT. I'm not sure who exactly has the broadcasting rights for round one, and then TNT, Sportsnet or TSN, excuse me, for in Canada. I am really okay with the Lightning having 2 days off.
True.
They're not out of the woods yet. In round two against Florida last year, they did have a back-to-back because of an Emily scheduling conflict. But in round one, I'm totally fine with them having 2 days off between game four and then the most crucial game of the series, game five.
And now, Jano is currently injured, and Cooper said that he wasn't going to play game one, but there's a slight possibility he could come back in round one. That 2 day gap could help Jano possibly come back later in the series if it ends up going that far. Now, I would think that the Lightning don't want to bring him back until he's 100%, but maybe that's a little silver lining to having those 2 day gap right there, and Jano could come back.
Absolutely. And I think that would be a major shakeup to the forward lines. Like we saw what that forward line was capable of in game 82 against the Red Wings when all four lines were clicking. And does that change the dynamic in the rhythm and flow? Probably, but Tanner Jeannot is better than the 13th forward on Lightning. So uh, honestly, I hope he comes back before the end of the year because he provides something that the Lightning desperately need.
Now, the Lightning and Leafs played 3 times this season. It's actually less than normal. I believe in years past, it's usually been 4 games, 4 division games. So a little bit different this year, but 3 times. And the Lightning only won one of them. That game was back in December 3rd of 2022. They won 4-3 in overtime. And then the Leafs took the next 2 games. But Michael, I think the most interesting thing about the previous games was they played 2 games in December, and then you had that large gap, and it wasn't until just a couple of weeks ago that the Lightning played the Leafs again, and that was a very physical, tough kind of game, and it's the only time we've seen both these teams after the trade deadline and all the changes that they made. Now, of course, the Lightning didn't have Tanner Jeannot for that game as he got hurt earlier in the season, but that is our most recent, here's what it may kind of look like, but as we've talked about so many times on this channel before, the regular season really doesn't mean anything, especially when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, when you talk about that game 81 for both teams, Joseph Woll was in net for the Leafs. He's not going to be in net come game one of the playoffs. It's going to be Ilya Samsonov. And so Wall was amazing, but again, he faced 48 or 50 shots. I'm not exactly sure which one. If the Lightning put 50 shots on Ilya Samsonov, I don't think he's going to replicate that type of performance for 7 games. So it'll be really interesting to see. I saw a lot of Lightning fans that were really down on that performance. And I thought, they battled hard. They were not at 100%. I don't think they came to that with a full lineup, even without Tanner Jeannot. And they hung tough with the Leafs. And so they should be just fine coming game one.
I think the big thing for Lightning fans in that game was that the Leafs didn't play some of their top players like Austin Matthews, and the Lightning
Mm.
still weren't able to beat them in that game. I think that's what kind of threw them off. But you're right. The Lightning this whole month really have been in. Well, we secured our spot. We're playing the Leafs. When's the playoffs? That's what it felt like for a large part of the end of the season. Which you always want to finish your strong or your best, but again, we've seen so many times with the Lightning ever since 2019 they just kind of coast into the playoffs and then they are able to flip a switch. So if they're able to do that again, and just like you said, there's going to be a lot of different players in the lineups. It's not going to look like basically any of the games we saw in the regular season. Who knows what could happen heading into the first couple of games here in the postseason for round one. All right, let's take a look at how these two teams stack up against each other. Michael, it's advantage Leafs for the most part here. 26% on the power play to the Lightning's 25.4%. The Leafs 81.9% on the penalty kill versus the 79.7% for the Lightning. Goals for the Lightning do have the advantage, 3.41 goals for per game. The Leafs 3.39. And then in goals against, the Leafs do have the advantage there at 2.68. For the Lightning, it's 3.07. While the Leafs do have the advantage in 3 out of the 4 categories here, Michael, the stats are actually pretty darn close. And the Lightning power play and really the whole entire play kind of fell off at the start and the beginning of the regular season. So not a huge difference to where you might say there's a clear advantage for one side here.
Yeah, absolutely not. They're very close when it comes to skill level. They're very close when it comes to the percentages. I saw a lot of people quote tweeting the lines that were sent out today from Lightning practice, and it was all Leaf fans, of course, and they were like, "Oh, we're definitely going to sweep this team." Like, what are these lines that we see? And that's not taking into account like power play for the Lightning. It was very frustrating at times. Don't get me wrong. Like, especially on the road in mid-January, early February, very frustrating. It's still really good, and it's really good at home, which is the thing that cost the Leafs in Game 6 of last year. They had the Lightning against the ropes, and ultimately they couldn't stop them. And so I think the Lightning will be just fine. Their penalty kill in Game 7 came up massive, and it always does in the playoffs. And the penalty kill does look a lot different this year than it did last year. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare has taken it a step back. He's no longer on the first unit. It's now Anthony Cirelli and Alex Killorn. Tanner Jeannot, should he come back, he'll be on the penalty kill again. Nick Paul, he'll probably be on the penalty kill again. They've got guys that can really help out with special team. And I don't know what the defense is going to look like on the power play because we never do. But ultimately, I think they'll be okay.
I agree with you. Again, we talked about the regular season doesn't really mean much, especially for the Lightning, and they had a great power play for a majority of the regular season. And then Jeannot's another guy, again got hurt. He was mixing in on the penalty kill a little bit there for the Lightning as well. Unclear if he's going to return in round one, and when he does return, if he'll even be 100%. I don't know. He may not even be on the penalty kill when he does return, so he might just come in and try to take a couple of minutes when he plays his first couple of games, but still no huge differences when it comes to the team stats. It's going to be a fight for this one. It's going to be a close one. It should be a fun series at the end of the day, but let's look at the difference makers because often one player can make the difference in these series. And Michael, we're going to start with your pick for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that's Anthony Cirelli, the two-way forward who has been fantastic. He was out for a majority of the regular season, but then when he came, or the start of the regular season, I should say, but then when he came back, he played pretty well. He's a great, again, two-way forward, a dynamic guy, and he had a pretty good year overall despite missing a good part to the season.
Yeah, so I kind of forgot about this. Both of my difference makers had less than 30 points this year for the Leafs and Lightning. But Anthony Cirelli is probably the most important forward on the Lightning. Braden Point's going to be the one that scores all the goals. Nikita Kucherov is going to distribute the puck. But Cirelli with Killorn in particular, those two forming a dynamic duo on the second or third line, they're going to be really important when it comes to shutting down the Leafs' top line. we always talk about what's the shutdown line for the Lightning, and for the longest time, it was Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, and Yanni Gord. And they scored when they had to in the playoffs, but they didn't really need to. That was reserved for the big guys. And last year, we saw that without any of those three, that role was thrust upon Brendan Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, and Alex Killorn. And I don't think Hagel is going to be on that line to start in game one. They might do it. They really were like juggling those lines at the end of the regular season. But Anthony Cirelli in particular, really important shorthanded penalty killer, really important defensive player. He's going to be tasked with shutting down Matthews and Marner and whoever they decide to put on that wing as well, because that has changed throughout the season, whether it's Nylander, whether it's Bunting, whether it's someone like Calle Yarncroke.
Anthony Cirelli scored some big goals for the Lightning against the Toronto Maple Leafs in the series last year. So did Nick Paul as well. But Cirelli, like you mentioned, he plays on a lot of different parts of the Lightning's game. The penalty kill, he's a great defender. He can also score. So I think it's a great pick for this first round, and hopefully he is able to step up for the Lightning here and help them get that series victory. But on the other side of things, Michael, your pick for the difference maker for the Toronto Maple Leafs is David Kampf. He's a guy that maybe goes underrated a little bit, I would say, but he's kind of had the Lightning's number in his couple of games. He scored a couple of times against the Lightning. It just seems like they have a little bit of trouble against him.
Yeah, career high in assists, career high in points this year. And he didn't have any goals this time around in the 3 games, but he had 2 points, which, like, if you can score 2 of your 27 points against the Lightning, then, you're doing something right. Like, I know that doesn't seem like a big number, but if you're not scoring a ton of points and you're scoring a couple of them against the Lightning, you're finding a formula for success. And so he's another one of those guys. He's a very, very solid defensive center. I think he's going to be tasked with shutting down the top line for the Lightning. That remains to be seen. Just like with Cirelli, can he stop the top line of the Leafs? That remains to be seen. There are some really high-end talent players for both of these sides. But I think Camp is one of the most underrated centers in the league. He's really upset when Toronto signed him before last season, and we saw what kind of damage he could do in the playoffs. I'm not so much scared of David Camp, but like, he is one of those guys that he's noticeable every time he's on the ice, and not because he's scoring any goals, but because he's shutting down your opponent or your top line.
Well, don't give him any breakaways because that's how he scored against the Lightning earlier this season. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, and the Lightning are able to get their top guys going even when he is out there. All right, the last and final part of our preview show here for round number 1 is the 3 keys to this series. Michael, here is what I have the Lightning. Number 1, need to be good on special teams. We were just talking about this a little bit earlier in the show. They've had good special teams in the middle parts of the regular season, but that's going to be a factor for them in this year in the playoffs. And remember, you usually see a lot less penalties called when it comes to the playoffs, so you got to capitalize on the ones you get. Number 2, it's be physical. Be tough. The Lightning have went out and got some guys that are tough guys. Of course, they lost Janot, which doesn't help their case there, but guys like Mikey Eastman are a fast-paced kind of players, and Maroon, Perry, those guys love to be physical, so take advantage of that to try and throw Toronto off of their game. And then number 3, of course, it's Andrei Vasilevskiy. He is the goalie that has been the saving grace for the Lightning in every single game, especially in the playoffs for the last 2 years. And if he can come through big for the Lightning once again, and the Lightning can help him out and not leave him out to dry, I think they'll have a lot of success in this series.
Yeah, so I'll just push back on one thing in particular. You mentioned like their playoff, there aren't a lot of calls in the playoffs, and there have been like studies done that show that the calls remain the same. The amount of infractions are are way raised in the playoffs. So it's not so much that they call less; it's the percentage that they call less. Like so,
Okay.
In
It
that
feels
case,
different, that's for sure.
it really does. It's like like minute. It feels like, why didn't you call that, or why did you call that? That's not really a penalty in the playoffs. Meanwhile, like this guy's getting get decapitated. Why is he not getting uh, um, a power play because of that? But I like all three of those. I think the Lightning are going to need their big guys to step up. And when I mean big guys, not necessarily do I mean guys that can score. I mean the legit, like big guys, like people like Pat
The
Maroon,
big
people like
rig.
Corey Bear, the big rig, exactly. You know, the grumpy old men line. I will not call them the school bus line, but the grumpy old men line of Peb and Perry and Maroon, ultimately in the regular season, they were not that good compared to the 2021, 2022. But if they can step it up and be half as good as they were in the 2021, 22 playoffs, then they should be just fine. And I'm not going to say that they're missing somebody, but like last year, they had Riley Nash on that line. This year, they're going to be intact unless there's another massive injury like there was last year, God forbid. They're going to be intact the entire playoff. So they know each other's game. They need to be physical. They need to provoke the Leafs, but they also need to stay out of the penalty box because we have seen people like Pat Maroon get penalties that have cost the team. Uh, Another guy that I would say for your first point is Ian Cole needs to stay out of the penalty
I
box.
was just going to mention that. Cole tends to take a lot of penalties, especially recently.
Yeah, so just stay out of the box. Sergachev is another guy. Stay out of the box. Like the Toronto power play is really good. We saw that in the series against the Lightning. But if you stay out of the box, you're giving them less opportunities. And specifically with guys like Cole, and if he plays Zach Bogosian, if they take one penalty, they might take three penalties. Like it really depends on the night. And if you take three penalties against the Leafs, you're going to lose. Like one guy taking three penalties, you're 100% going to lose. So
Right.
if they don't do that, Vasilevsky is Vasilevsky, and they push the Leafs around to a certain extent, I think they should be fine. Like a lot of people are saying that this is the Leafs year, but I think the Lightning should be fine.
Well, speaking of that, let's go to our predictions for the series. Michael, I'll let you start things off. What is your official prediction for the Lightning and Leafs in round number one?
Lightning in seven because it's the most fun outcome. Uh, Ultimately, I chose between Lightning in six and Lightning in seven. I still think the Lightning could win. Mikey Nisimont has been a fantastic replacement for Tanner Janelle. Like I want Nisimont in the top six. Probably not going to happen, but I want him in the top six come playoff time. And the defense has been great this year. At times, it's been really bad, but at times it's been great this year. And the big guys that have stepped up, like Nick Perbix and Darren Radish, are gonna be used a lot. And for Radish and Perbix in particular, it's sink or swim. Cole knows what he needs to do, but on that right side of defense, Cernak knows what he needs to do, and Radish and Perbix, they will find out very quickly. And they have the better goalie in the series. Ultimately, like that's the driving force of most of my playoff picks is who's the better goaltender. And the better goaltender in most series is going to be Andre Vasilevsky.
In every
So
series, it's going to be the better goaltender.
it depends on the year, but year in and year out, he is the best goalie in the NHL. But particular years, like people like Linus Allmark just seem to have better numbers than Vasilevsky. And that's not a discredit to Vasi, but
Yeah.
Allmark has had a great season this year. And we'll talk about that potentially in round two. But year in and year out, Vasilevsky's been better than Samsonov. He's been better than Matt Murray. He's been better than Joseph Wall. So it doesn't matter who the Leafs go with. They're going to have the second best goaltender. And I think that's what cost them.
My official prediction: Lightning in four. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
It's
no,
my
that's what we
favorite thing.
want.
I know. It's the Lightning in four. It's the homer in me, but I do agree with you. Lightning in seven. Listen, the Lightning have made 3 straight Stanley Cup finals for a reason. And a lot of these players are, it's still that core group. Nothing much has really changed for the Lightning with a couple of young rookies. And then, of course, guys like Tanner Jeannot and Mikey Eastman. Other than that, this is the same team that has constantly gone back to the Stanley Cup finals. They can do it. They had a rough end of the regular season, yes, and Toronto is probably one of their better teams that we've seen in years before. I think the stats are in their favor, but until I am proved incorrect, I think the Lightning are the favorites every time they go into these playoff matchups. Hopefully they'll be able to pull it out, and we'll be talking about them getting ready for round 2. But as of right now, it should be a fun one regardless, and the Lightning have had a lot of success over the last couple of years. So no matter what happens, enjoy the series. It should be lots of fun. Don't forget to follow us on social media at BoltReport_TB for all your coverage on the Lightning all season long. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if you did enjoy this one, and ring that bell for notifications so you don't miss out on future videos just like this one. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Go Bolts!